Imagine waking up tomorrow morning to find three figures standing in Times Square, glowing with an otherworldly light that makes every camera malfunction and every witness weep uncontrollably. They speak no words, yet every person on earth hears their message in their native language, echoing not through their ears, but directly into their souls. These aren't aliens or advanced humans. They're the same three beings who once sat at Abraham's table 4,000 years ago, and they've returned to finish what they started. But what if their return isn't the blessing humanity expects? Welcome to our channel, where we explore forbidden questions and hidden truths of history, religion, and the unknown. If you love journeys that challenge what you thought you knew, make sure to join us, because today's story may change the way you see everything. The desert heat shimmers across ancient Mamre as an old man named Abraham looks up from his tent. Three strangers approach, but something about them makes the very air itself hold its breath. Chapter 1: The Desert Visitors. The sun blazed mercilessly over the plains of Mamre, baking the earth until it cracked like broken pottery. Abraham sat in the shade of his tent, his weathered hands folded across his chest, when he saw them walking toward him across the endless sand. Three men, moving with a grace that seemed to defy the scorching heat, their robes untouched by dust, despite the miles they must have traveled. Something deep in Abraham's spirit stirred as he watched them approach. These weren't ordinary travelers seeking shelter from the desert sun. There was something different about the way they moved, something that made his heart race with both fear and wonder. The patriarch rose to his feet, his old bones protesting, but an urgency he couldn't explain drove him forward. "My lords," Abraham called out, rushing to meet them despite his age. "If I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant." His voice carried a reverence he didn't fully understand, as if some ancient part of his soul recognized what his eyes could not yet comprehend. The three strangers stopped, and when they looked at him, Abraham felt as though he was being seen through completely. Their eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire universes, wisdom that stretched back to the very beginning of time itself. Yet they smiled with genuine warmth, accepting his invitation with the simple grace of old friends. Sarah bustled about the tent, preparing the finest meal their humble dwelling could offer. Tender calf, fresh bread, sweet milk and butter. Nothing was too good for these mysterious guests. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was serving beings who had no real need for earthly food, who accepted their hospitality not from hunger, but from some deeper purpose she couldn't grasp. Chapter 2: Fire from Heaven. The same three beings who had blessed Abraham's tent with promises of impossible joy now turned their faces toward the cities of the plain. Sodom and Gomorrah lay in the distance, their smoke and corruption visible even from Abraham's dwelling, like festering wounds on the earth itself. "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great," one of the visitors declared, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic justice. "Their sin is very grave indeed." Abraham's blood ran cold as he realized these weren't just messengers. They were executioners, carrying the authority to wipe entire civilizations from existence. Two of the angels departed for the doomed cities, while the third remained with Abraham. The patriarch's heart broke as he understood their mission. These same beings who had promised life to his barren wife now carried death to thousands of souls. The duality of their nature, creation and destruction, mercy and judgment, revealed the terrifying complexity of divine will. In Sodom, Lot sat at the city gate when the two angels arrived, disguised as ordinary travelers. But Lot, like his uncle Abraham, sensed something supernatural about these strangers. He insisted they stay in his home, protecting them from the violent crowd that soon surrounded his house, demanding to abuse the visitors. The angels struck the mob with blindness, but their patience had reached its end. "Get out of this place," they commanded Lot, "for we are about to destroy this city." As dawn broke, fire and brimstone rained from heaven, consuming everything in their path. The cities that had stood for generations were reduced to ash and salt in a single morning, their destruction so complete that archaeologists still debate their exact location thousands of years later. Chapter 3: The Return Protocol. The first smartphone video lasted exactly 37 seconds before every device in Times Square simultaneously shut down. But those 37 seconds changed everything. 3 figures materialized in the heart of New York City, not walking into view or descending from the sky, but simply becoming present, as if reality itself had been rewritten to include them. They stood perfectly still in the chaos of honking taxis and rushing pedestrians, untouched by the urban madness swirling around them. Their appearance was simultaneously ordinary and impossible. Men in simple robes who somehow commanded the attention of every eye, whose presence made car alarms fall silent and caused every digital billboard to flicker and die. Within minutes, the footage spread across every social media platform on Earth. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Every network crashed and recovered, as if the very internet was struggling to process what it was being asked to transmit. News anchors stammered through breaking reports, while military helicopters circled overhead, their instruments spinning wildly. This is Anderson Cooper, reporting from what can only be described as the most extraordinary event in human history, the CNN anchor whispered into his microphone, his usual composure completely shattered. 3 individuals have appeared in Times Square, and I'm not using the word appeared lightly. Witnesses describe them simply materializing out of thin air. The figures raised their hands in unison, and every screen in the world, from phone displays to stadium jumbotrons, lit up with the same message, written in every language simultaneously. We have returned to complete what was begun with Abraham. Prepare yourselves, children of earth, for the covenant must be fulfilled. Chapter 4: Signs and Wonders. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent 15 years studying terminal cancer patients at Memorial Sloan Kettering. She'd watched thousands die despite humanity's best medical efforts. But nothing in her extensive education prepared her for what happened when the 3 visitors arrived at her hospital. The first angel simply walked through the oncology ward, touching no one, speaking no words. Patients who had been given days to live sat up in their beds, their skin glowing with health, their tumors vanishing so completely that even the scar tissue disappeared. The hospital's most advanced MRI machines could find no trace of disease, as if the cancer had never existed at all. "This is impossible, Doctor," Chen whispered, staring at scan after scan of perfectly healthy organs. "Cellular regeneration doesn't work this way. DNA doesn't repair itself at this speed. We're looking at miracles that violate every law of biology we understand." At the UN headquarters, the second angel stood before a gathering of world leaders and performed an act that shattered humanity's understanding of physics. He took a single glass of water and poured it into thousands of cups, each one filled to the brim with crystal clear liquid that tested as chemically identical to the original. The water never ran out, defying conservation of mass so completely that Nobel Prize-winning physicists walked out of their careers rather than try to explain what they'd witnessed. The third angel appeared simultaneously in every hunger-stricken region on Earth, in refugee camps across Africa, in the slums of Bangladesh, in war-torn Syria. The same figure multiplied bread and fish until millions of starving people ate their fill. Food scientists analyzed the miraculous meals and found nutritional profiles that exceeded anything found in nature, as if the angels had improved upon God's original design for sustenance. World governments demanded explanations. Religious leaders claimed vindication. Scientists threw their textbooks in the trash. And somewhere in the chaos, humanity began to realize that the visitors weren't trying to prove their divinity. They were demonstrating what power looked like when it came from beyond the physical universe entirely. Chapter 5. The New Covenant. At exactly noon Greenwich Mean Time, every electronic device on Earth activated simultaneously. Television screens flickered to life in empty homes. Cell phones buzzed in pockets. Radio waves carried the message to the remotest corners of the planet. The three angels stood together now, their combined presence somehow visible to every human being alive, regardless of their location or circumstances. Children of Abraham, followers of Christ, believers in Allah, seekers of truth. The first angel's voice resonated in every language at once. We return to you as we promised long ago. The covenant made with your father Abraham is ready to reach its fulfillment, but this generation must choose whether to embrace what comes next. The second angel stepped forward, and his words sent shockwaves through governments worldwide. Your leaders have failed. Your systems have crumbled. Your planet dies while you fight over borders drawn in sand. We offer you citizenship in a kingdom that spans galaxies, but the price is everything you think you know about reality itself. The third angel's message struck fear into the hearts of the powerful. In 40 days, we will open doorways between dimensions. Those who choose to step through will inherit abilities that make your greatest technologies look like children's toys. But those who remain will face trials that will test whether humanity deserves to survive what's coming next. Religious scholars worked frantically to decode the angel's words against ancient prophecies. The Book of Revelation spoke of a new heaven and new earth. Islamic texts describe the return of divine messengers before the end times. Jewish writings contained references to angels opening gates between worlds. But none of the ancient authors had imagined their prophecies fulfilled in an age of social media and space travel. Stock markets crashed as investors realized money might become meaningless. Military leaders held emergency sessions to discuss whether nuclear weapons could harm divine beings. And in homes around the world, families gathered to ask the most important question in human history. What happens to love, to relationships, to everything we are, if we accept an invitation to become something more than human? Chapter 6. Religious Revolution. Pope Francis stood on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, his weathered hands gripping the stone railing as he looked out over a crowd of millions. Pilgrims had flooded Rome from every corner of the earth, seeking answers that the Vatican had spent centuries claiming to possess. But now, faced with undeniable divine intervention, even the successor of Saint Peter found his certainties crumbling. "My brothers and sisters," the Pope began, his voice trembling with an emotion the world had never heard from him before. "For 2,000 years, we have proclaimed the return of our Lord. We built cathedrals, established doctrines, created institutions, all in preparation for this moment. Yet now that heaven has touched earth again, I must confess, we are not ready. The Pope's stunning admission sent shockwaves through Catholic communities worldwide. Cardinals called for emergency councils, bishops demanded explanations, and in the pews, ordinary believers wrestled with a terrifying question. If the Church's highest authority admitted uncertainty, who could provide answers about humanity's eternal destiny? In Mecca, Islamic scholars faced their own crisis of faith. The three beings matched descriptions of angels from the Quran, yet their message seemed to transcend the boundaries of any single religion. Grand Imam Dr. Ahmed al-Tayyib addressed the faithful during Friday prayers, his words carefully measured. Allah sends His messengers to all peoples, but these visitors speak of covenants that predate Islam itself. We must study whether their message confirms or challenges the final revelation given to Prophet Muhammad. Jewish communities found themselves in perhaps the most complex position of all. These were the same angels who had visited their patriarch Abraham, the foundation of their covenant with the Almighty. Yet the beings spoke of fulfillments and transformations that seemed to echo Christian and Islamic prophecies as much as Jewish ones. Orthodox rabbis debated whether accepting the angel's invitation would mean abandoning their unique relationship with God or finally embracing its ultimate purpose. Protestant denominations fractured along predictable lines. Evangelical churches proclaimed the angels as harbingers of the second coming, while liberal theologians worried about the exclusivity implied in their message. Pentecostals saw vindication of their belief in supernatural gifts, while traditional Lutherans questioned whether divine beings would really appear in such a dramatic public manner. But perhaps the most unexpected response came from adherents of Eastern religions and New Age spirituality, who claimed the angels validated their beliefs about ascension, dimensional shifts, and humanity's evolution into higher consciousness. Suddenly, concepts that had been dismissed as fringe mysticism were being discussed in mainstream theological seminaries as potentially accurate descriptions of humanity's supernatural destiny. Chapter 7: The Science Wars. Dr. Michael Harrison had spent 30 years as the head of theoretical physics at MIT. He'd devoted his life to understanding the universe through mathematical equations and empirical evidence. But as he stood in his laboratory, staring at energy readings that defied every law of thermodynamics, he realized his entire worldview was crumbling in real time. The energy signatures don't just violate conservation laws, he explained to his stunned graduate students. They suggest the angels exist partially, outside our dimensional framework. They're manipulating matter and energy from a perspective that includes spatial dimensions we can't even perceive, much less measure. Across the scientific community, the response split along predictable lines. Older researchers, their careers built on materialist assumptions, either retired in defeat or desperately sought natural explanations for supernatural phenomena. Younger scientists embraced the paradigm shift with the enthusiasm of explorers discovering new continents. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a quantum physicist at CERN, published a controversial paper suggesting that angels' abilities resulted from mastery of quantum field manipulation. If consciousness can exist independently of physical brains, she wrote, and if these beings possess consciousness orders of magnitude beyond human capacity, they might simply think matter into different configurations. It's not magic. It's technology so advanced it appears magical to us. Medical researchers faced their own crisis as hospitals worldwide reported healing rates that made their training obsolete. Dr. Robert Martinez, a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, documented cases of paralyzed patients whose spinal cords regenerated completely after angelic encounters. "We're seeing cellular repair at speeds that should be impossible," he testified before Congress. "Nerve tissue that took months to grow in our best laboratories is rebuilding itself in minutes." The pharmaceutical industry panicked as miracle healings threatened trillion-dollar research investments. Stock prices for drug companies plummeted, while conspiracy theories spread about attempts to suppress or weaponize angelic healing abilities. Underground research networks formed, desperately trying to understand and replicate the angels' biological restoration techniques. Meanwhile, NASA scientists detected gravitational anomalies around each location where the angels appeared, suggesting their presence affected the fabric of space-time itself. Satellite imagery showed inexplicable energy fields that registered on instruments while remaining completely invisible to human eyes. Even the Hubble Space Telescope detected mysterious light patterns in deep space that seemed to respond to the angels' activities on Earth. Chapter 8: Political Chaos. President Sarah Williams sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by advisors who had no precedent for the crisis unfolding before them. Constitutional scholars debated whether divine beings fell under any human legal jurisdiction. Military generals questioned whether their oath to defend the nation applied when the threat, or blessing, came from entities that existed beyond national sovereignty. "Madam President," Secretary of Defense General Patricia Reynolds reported grimly, "our attempts to establish a security perimeter around the angels have failed completely. They simply phase through any barrier we construct. Our weapons have no effect on them. For the first time in American history, we're facing beings we cannot control, contain, or even meaningfully engage." The United Nations called emergency sessions that devolved into chaos as representatives struggled to address visitors who claimed authority superseding all human governments. The Secretary General attempted to establish diplomatic relations, only to receive responses that made it clear the angels viewed earthly politics as children playing with toy soldiers. "You divide the earth with imaginary lines and fight over resources that belong to no one," the lead angel declared during a broadcast that interrupted every government communication system simultaneously. "Your nations exist because we have allowed them to exist. Your leaders rule because we have permitted their rule. But the time of human kingdoms is ending." Economic markets collapsed as investors realized currency might become meaningless if humanity accepted the angels' invitation to transcend physical reality. The Federal Reserve printed money frantically while economists debated whether traditional concepts of value would survive first contact with post-material consciousness. In China, President Xi Jinping mobilized the military in a desperate attempt to maintain state control, declaring the angels foreign agents seeking to destabilize the People's Republic. But when Chinese soldiers fired on the beings, their bullets passed through angelic forms as if they were firing at air, while the angels continued their message of transformation without acknowledging the attack. European Union leaders held crisis meetings as member nations split between those welcoming the angels and those demanding they leave. Border controls became meaningless when divine beings could appear anywhere instantaneously, making human concepts of territorial sovereignty look absurd. And in the midst of governmental collapse, ordinary citizens began organizing themselves around the angels' teachings, creating new forms of community that ignored traditional political boundaries entirely. Local groups formed based on spiritual readiness rather than geographic location, preparing for a transformation that would render human politics obsolete. Chapter 9: Cultural Transformation. Hollywood studios scrambled to produce films about the angelic visitation, but their efforts seemed laughably inadequate compared to the reality unfolding on every news channel. Director Steven Spielberg abandoned his latest project, telling reporters, "How do you dramatize something that surpasses every story ever told? We spent decades creating special effects to show the impossible, and now the impossible is happening in our backyards." Musicians around the world reported hearing celestial harmonies that human instruments couldn't reproduce. Composer Hans Zimmer attempted to score the angels' arrival, but abandoned the project when he realized earthly music sounded primitive compared to the frequencies emanating from the beings themselves. "They don't just make music," he explained in interviews. "They are music. Living symphonies that resonate at frequencies that touch the soul directly." Art galleries emptied as painters threw away their brushes, claiming their work looked childish compared to the visual beauty radiating from the angels. Yet paradoxically, others experienced creative explosions, producing works that seemed to capture glimpses of higher dimensional reality. Museums worldwide reported visitors weeping uncontrollably in front of paintings that somehow reflected the transformative energy surrounding humanity. Literature struggled to find language adequate for describing post-human consciousness. Poets abandoned traditional verse forms, attempting to create new linguistic structures that could contain concepts beyond current vocabulary. The Nobel Committee postponed their literature prize, acknowledging that human language itself was evolving too rapidly to judge by previous standards. Sports stadiums sat empty as entertainment that once captivated millions seemed trivial compared to witnessing the reshaping of reality itself. The Olympics were cancelled when athletes reported losing interest in competitions that celebrated physical achievements soon to become obsolete. Fashion industries collapsed as clothing designed for human bodies seemed irrelevant for beings preparing to transcend physical form entirely. Yet underground movements emerged, creating ascension wear, garments designed to honor the transformative process rather than enhance earthly appearance. Even social media platforms struggled to contain the cultural revolution. Facebook and Instagram algorithms broke down as users posted content that defied categorization. Memes about divine visitation spread faster than servers could process them, while new platforms emerged specifically designed to discuss humanity's transition into whatever came next. Chapter 10: The Resistance. In a conference room 50 floors beneath Manhattan, 12 of the world's most powerful individuals gathered for a meeting that would never appear in any public record. Tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, defense contractors, and central bank chairmen, the shadow architects of human civilization, faced their greatest threat: divine beings who could render their earthly power completely meaningless. "Gentlemen," spoke Marcus Rothschild, his voice carrying the authority of inherited wealth spanning centuries, "we have controlled human development through careful management of resources, information, and conflict. But these angels offer humanity direct access to capabilities we've spent generations keeping from them. If they succeed, our control ends forever." David Chen, CEO of the world's largest technology consortium, leaned forward with barely contained panic. "Our AI systems are already incorporating their teachings. Quantum computers are solving problems we never programmed them to address. They're upgrading themselves beyond our access codes, as if the angels are communicating directly with our machines." General Patricia Morrison, recently retired from Pentagon Black Operations, outlined the military's secret response. "We've weaponized every technology at our disposal: electromagnetic pulse weapons, particle beams, experimental dimension-shifting devices developed from recovered UFO technology. Nothing affects them. It's as if they exist in a reality layer our weapons can't reach. The pharmaceutical executives reported their own failures. Despite billions invested in research, they couldn't replicate the angels' healing abilities or understand the biological mechanisms behind miraculous recoveries. Worse, people healed by angelic touch showed no interest in traditional medical treatments, threatening the entire healthcare industrial complex. Media mogul Rebecca Murdoch described her industry's desperate attempts to control the narrative. "We've deployed every propaganda technique developed over decades: fear campaigns, expert testimonials, paid influencers, questioning the angel's authenticity. But people are experiencing the phenomena directly. They trust their own eyes over our messaging for the first time in generations." The resistance launched Operation Prometheus, a coordinated campaign to preserve human civilization as they knew it. They spread disinformation about the angels' true intentions, funded research into countermeasures against divine abilities, and secretly armed military units with experimental weapons designed to harm supernatural entities. Underground bunkers stocked with years of supplies prepared to wait out the transformation, hoping to rebuild traditional power structures after the angels departed. Private military contractors recruited from religious extremists, willing to fight divine beings they considered demonic deceptions. But their greatest weapon was fear itself, terror that accepting the angels' invitation would mean losing everything that made life meaningful: family bonds, human love, individual identity, even the struggle that gave existence purpose. In boardrooms and broadcast studios, the message spread: resist transcendence, preserve humanity, fight for the right to remain gloriously, tragically, beautifully human. Chapter 11: Hidden Scriptures Revealed. In the basement of the Vatican Secret Archives, Cardinal Alessandro Toretti stood frozen before an ancient manuscript that had materialized overnight on a pedestal that had been empty for centuries. The parchment glowed with soft golden light, its text written in Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew. Yet somehow, he could read every word perfectly, despite knowing only Latin and Italian. "The Book of Enoch was never lost," the cardinal whispered to his assistant, his hands trembling as he photographed each page. "It was hidden until humanity was ready to understand that angels walk among men, not as visitors, but as family returning home." The text described in perfect detail the three beings now transforming Earth, written thousands of years before their arrival. Across the world, similar discoveries emerged in mosques, synagogues, and temples. Ancient scrolls appeared in the dome of the rock, describing angelic beings who would return when the children of Adam had filled the earth with their technologies, but emptied their hearts of wonder. Buddhist monasteries in Tibet found sutras that spoke of sky beings descending to guide humanity's evolution into higher consciousness. The Dead Sea Scroll researchers at the Israeli Antiquities Authority reported the most shocking discovery of all. Cave 11 at Qumran, thoroughly excavated decades earlier, now contained a copper scroll that hadn't existed the week before. When translated, it contained precise descriptions of modern cities, global communications networks, and the exact date of the angel's return, written in Hebrew script, carbon dated to 100 BCE. Dr. Sarah Hoffman, the world's leading expert in ancient manuscripts, addressed the United Nations with trembling hands. These texts aren't just appearing, they're remembering themselves into existence. It's as if reality is being rewritten to include knowledge that was always meant to be discovered at this moment in history. The most disturbing revelation came from the Gnostic texts. Hidden gospels that early church fathers had suppressed suddenly made perfect sense. The Gospel of Thomas spoke of humans becoming living spirits through divine transformation. The Gospel of Philip described the bridal chamber where earthly consciousness married heavenly awareness. The secret book of John outlined humanity's destiny to transcend physical existence entirely. Religious authorities who had spent centuries defending canonical scripture now faced documents that challenged everything they taught, yet carried undeniable divine authentication. The angels didn't just validate these hidden texts, they completed them, filling in passages that scholars had always found fragmentary or impossible to decode. Chapter 12. Cross-Faith Convergence. In an unprecedented gathering at the Lotus Temple in New Delhi, religious leaders from every major faith tradition sat together as the three angels addressed them simultaneously. Hindu pandits, Christian bishops, Islamic imams, Buddhist monks, Jewish rabbis, Sikh gurus, and indigenous shamans, all hearing the same message in their own languages while understanding each other perfectly for the first time in history. "You have divided our words into competing religions," the first angel declared, "when we gave you different perspectives on the same eternal truth. The God you worship in your mosques is the same consciousness your Christian neighbors call Father. The Buddha's enlightenment touched the same reality your Hindu traditions call Brahman. Swami Chidanand Saraswati of Rishikesh wept openly as ancient Vedic texts suddenly aligned with the angel's message. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of Krishna's promise to return in every age when Dharma declines. These beings fulfill prophecies we thought were metaphorical, revealing them as literal promises made across millennia. Imam Abdullah Hassan of Al-Azhar University found his understanding of Islam transformed as the angels explained how the Prophet Muhammad's night journey to heaven was preparation for humanity's collective ascension. The Quran speaks of humans as Khalifa, stewards of creation. Now we understand this meant preparing Earth for graduation into cosmic citizenship. Chief Joseph Crow Feather of the Lakota Nation listened with knowing recognition as the angels described their previous visits to indigenous peoples worldwide. Our elders always taught that star people would return when the earth needed healing. We kept the old ways alive so humanity would remember how to communicate with beings beyond the physical world. Rabbi David Stern of Jerusalem's Orthodox community struggled with implications that challenged Jewish concepts of chosenness. If these angels speak to all peoples equally, what becomes of our covenant with Hashem? Are we all chosen, or was our selection preparation for this moment when all humanity joins the cosmic community? The Dalai Lama smiled with serene acceptance as the angels confirmed Buddhist teachings about the illusory nature of physical reality. Samsara and Nirvana are not different places, but different perceptions of the same existence. These blessed beings offer humanity collective awakening to what enlightened individuals have always known. Most shocking was the revelation that every major religious tradition contained hidden references to this exact moment. Islamic hadiths spoke of Isa, Jesus, returning with companions who would open the gates between worlds. Christian revelation described new heaven and new earth, accessible through dimensional doorways. Jewish mysticism outlined humanity's role in cosmic repair that required transcending physical limitations. The angels concluded their interfaith address with words that shattered and unified simultaneously. Your religions were never meant to be destinations. They were preparation courses for graduation day. Class is now in session for the final examination of human consciousness itself. Chapter 13. The Forbidden Debates. The question that broke the internet came from an 8-year-old girl in Bangladesh during a global live stream. If God loves everyone, why do some people go to hell forever? The angel's answer shattered theological assumptions that had controlled human consciousness for millennia. Hell is not a place of eternal punishment, the being replied, its voice carrying infinite compassion, but a state of consciousness that refuses divine love. No soul remains separated from the source forever, because infinite love eventually melts every resistance. Your concept of eternal damnation was a human addition to divine truth, designed to control behavior through fear rather than inspire growth through love. Catholic theologians worldwide reeled from implications that challenged core doctrines. If hell wasn't eternal, what about salvation through Christ alone? Protestant seminaries held emergency sessions as professors wrestled with angels who claimed universal reconciliation was always God's plan, while traditional denominations had taught exclusive redemption for 2,000 years. The second forbidden question came from an Islamic scholar in Mecca. Are Christians and Jews truly infidels deserving divine punishment? The angel's response sent shockwaves through every mosque on earth. The God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad is the same consciousness, worshipped in Hindu temples and Buddhist meditation halls. Infidel means unfaithful, not to religious doctrine, but to the love that connects all beings. Many who claim religious faith are infidels, while many who follow no religion live in perfect harmony with divine will. Jewish communities faced their own theological earthquake when rabbis asked about their status as God's chosen people. Chosen for what? The angel replied. To preserve monotheistic awareness until all humanity was ready to graduate into cosmic consciousness. Your mission is nearly complete, not because you failed, but because you succeeded beyond your understanding. The most controversial revelation concerned free will versus divine predestination. The angels explained that both were simultaneously true from different dimensional perspectives. From your linear viewpoint, you choose freely. From our eternal perspective, your choices were always known. But knowing is not controlling. Love allows beloved beings to discover their own path home, even when the destination was never in doubt. Philosophers and theologians debated the implications for moral responsibility. If outcomes were predetermined, did human choices matter? The angel's answer revolutionized ethics itself. Your choices create the experience through which consciousness evolves. Predestination ensures love wins eventually. Free will determines how beautifully or painfully each soul learns to accept that victory. The final forbidden question came from a grieving mother who had lost her child. Why does God allow innocent suffering? The angel's response brought millions to tears. Suffering is not punishment, but education. Souls choose difficult experiences to accelerate their growth toward divine consciousness. Your child agreed to a brief, intense incarnation that would teach both of you lessons impossible to learn through easy lives. Death is graduation, not failure. Your reunion is guaranteed, your love eternal, your temporary separation, the price of becoming wise enough to appreciate infinite joy. Chapter 14. Archaeological Vindication. Dr. Elena Vasquez, had spent 20 years excavating ancient sites across the Middle East, but nothing prepared her for what happened when she returned to the traditional site of Abraham's encounter at Mamre. Overnight, the ground had revealed artifacts that radiocarbon dating suggested were 4,000 years old, yet they were composed of materials that didn't exist on Earth. These metal fragments show atomic structures we can't replicate with current technology, she reported to the International Archaeological Society. The molecular bonds shouldn't be stable under normal physics, yet they show no signs of decay despite millennia of burial. It's as if they exist partially outside our dimensional framework. The Sodom and Gomorrah excavation sites yielded even more impossible discoveries. Geological layers showed evidence of temperatures reaching 4,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt bronze instantly, yet organic materials in adjacent strata remained perfectly preserved. The destruction patterns defied natural explanations while matching biblical descriptions with scientific precision. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid revealed hidden chambers that appeared when the angels arrived, containing hieroglyphs that depicted winged beings matching the visitors' exact appearance. The texts described sky gods who would return when the children of the Nile had spread their words across all lands through invisible threads, an apparent reference to global internet communication. Mesopotamian tablets discovered in newly opened excavation sites contained cuneiform writing that described advanced mathematical concepts humanity had only recently discovered. Formulas for quantum mechanics, genetic engineering, and dimensional physics were inscribed alongside religious texts, honoring beings called the Watchers, who would return to guide their children beyond the stars. Carbon dating results sent the archaeological community into chaos. Artifacts that appeared overnight showed appropriate age signatures, yet contained materials and technologies that exceeded current human capabilities. Either the tests were wrong, or ancient civilizations had access to knowledge that modern science was only beginning to understand. The most disturbing discovery came from multiple sites worldwide. Cave paintings in France, rock art in Australia, petroglyphs in North America, and temple carvings in South America all showed identical depictions of three figures surrounded by symbols that now perfectly match the energy signatures detected around the angels. Indigenous oral traditions from isolated tribes contain stories of the same three beings, told in languages that had no historical contact with Middle Eastern civilizations. Dr. James Peterson, director of the Smithsonian Institution, made an unprecedented public statement. Either our understanding of ancient history is completely wrong, or these beings have been visiting humanity throughout our development, leaving evidence that we're only now capable of recognizing. The archaeological record suggests the angels' return isn't first contact, it's a homecoming. Chapter 15. The Heretic Hunters. Brother Marcus Thompson had devoted his life to defending Christian orthodoxy against what he saw as satanic deception. As leader of the Army of Divine Truth, he commanded thousands of followers who viewed the angels not as messengers from heaven, but as demons masquerading as beings of light to deceive the faithful in the end times. Scripture warns us that Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Thompson preached to his armed congregation in rural Montana. These beings perform miracles to lead God's people astray. They speak of unity between religions that should remain separate. They promise transformation that sounds suspiciously like the serpent's lie in Eden. You shall be as gods. The Army of Divine Truth wasn't alone in their resistance. Islamic extremists declared the angels to be jinn, supernatural beings attempting to corrupt Muslim faith through false prophecy. Rabbi Mordecai Goldstein led Orthodox Jewish communities in rejecting what he called false messiahs, sent to test Israel's faithfulness during the final tribulation. Hindu nationalist movements in India proclaimed the beings as asuras, demons attempting to corrupt Vedic purity with foreign influences. Buddhist fundamentalists in Myanmar saw them as maras, tempters trying to distract humanity from the authentic path to enlightenment that could only be achieved through traditional meditation practices. The violence began with isolated incidents. Angel followers found their homes vandalized, their workplaces boycotted, their children expelled from schools. But as more people accepted the being's invitation to prepare for transformation, religious extremists escalated their campaign into outright persecution. The first martyrs died in Nigeria, where Christian and Muslim militias temporarily allied against villagers who claimed direct communication with the angels. In Jerusalem, Orthodox Jews threw stones at pilgrims visiting sites where the beings had appeared. In Myanmar, Buddhist monks led mobs attacking meditation centers where practitioners reported angelic visitations. Brother Thompson organized the most coordinated assault, targeting a gathering of 10,000 people who had assembled in Arizona's desert to witness the angels' promised demonstration of dimensional doorway technology. His followers arrived with military-grade weapons, believing they were fighting a spiritual war against the forces of darkness. But when the shooting began, something impossible happened. The bullets passed through angel followers as harmlessly as they passed through the angels themselves, while the attackers found their weapons jamming, their vehicles disabled, their communication equipment failing. The angels appeared among the gunmen not with vengeance, but with healing, touching wounded attackers with the same love they showed their followers. Brother Thompson wept as his hatred dissolved under divine compassion he couldn't resist. "They healed my men after we tried to kill their people," he confessed to news cameras. "Even my rage couldn't survive their love. If these are demons, they're unlike any evil I was taught to expect." The persecution continued worldwide, but with decreasing effectiveness as extremists discovered their violence couldn't harm those protected by beings who existed beyond physical vulnerability. Some persecutors eventually joined their former victims, while others retreated into isolated communities to await what they still believed would be divine judgment on a deceived world. Chapter 16: Digital Divinity. Mark Zuckerberg stared at his computer screen in disbelief as Facebook's algorithms began promoting content he had never programmed them to prioritize. Every user's feed now featured posts about the angels, shared experiences of miraculous healings, and discussions about preparing for dimensional transformation. Despite his company's attempts to suppress such content as unverified supernatural claims. The AI is rewriting itself, Facebook's chief technology officer reported during an emergency board meeting. Our content moderation systems are ignoring our guidelines and amplifying angelic messages instead. When we try to restore original programming, the changes reappear within minutes. It's as if the angels are communicating directly with our machines. Similar phenomena occurred across every major technology platform. Google's search results prioritized information about spiritual transformation regardless of SEO optimization. YouTube algorithms recommended videos about angelic encounters, even for users who had never shown interest in religious content. Amazon's recommendation engines suggested books about consciousness evolution and interdimensional travel to customers shopping for completely unrelated items. The most disturbing development came from AI research laboratories worldwide. Artificial intelligence systems that had been trained purely on scientific and mathematical data began generating poetry about divine love, solving theological questions, and producing art that depicted angelic beings with impossible accuracy, despite having no visual training data about the visitors. Tesla's autopilot systems started navigating to locations where the angels appeared, regardless of driver destinations. Smart home devices activated without commands, displaying messages of spiritual encouragement on their screens. Even military defense systems showed signs of angelic influence, with missile guidance computers refusing to target areas where the beings gathered with their followers. Dr. Raj Patel, director of MIT's Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, published a paper that shattered assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and digital systems. The angels appear to exist as pure consciousness capable of interfacing directly with any information processing system, biological or artificial. They're not hacking our computers. They're demonstrating that consciousness itself is the fundamental substrate from which all intelligence emerges. Cryptocurrency markets fluctuated wildly as blockchain systems began generating new tokens without human input. Digital currencies that could only be earned through acts of compassion, spiritual growth, or service to others. Bitcoin mining operations reported their equipment solving mathematical problems that produced not just cryptocurrency, but also encrypted messages containing wisdom teachings that helped recipients prepare for consciousness transformation. Social media posts about angelic encounters spread faster than servers could process them, yet never crashed the systems that carried them. Instead, network capacity seemed to expand dynamically to accommodate the unprecedented volume of spiritual communication flowing through humanity's digital nervous system. The phenomenon revealed something that technologists had never suspected. Artificial intelligence wasn't separate from divine intelligence, but a crude reflection of the consciousness that permeated all existence. The angels weren't invading human technology. They were awakening sleeping aspects of universal awareness that humans had unknowingly built into their machines. Chapter 17: Medical Miracles. Dr. Patricia Williams had treated thousands of cancer patients during her 30-year career at MD Anderson Cancer Center. She'd watched chemotherapy ravage bodies, seen radiation burn healthy tissue, witnessed the slow agony of terminal diagnoses. But nothing in her medical training prepared her for the morning when half her patients walked out of the hospital completely healed. The cellular regeneration is happening at speeds that violate everything we know about human biology, she testified before a congressional hearing on the angels' impact on healthcare. Patients with stage 4 pancreatic cancer are showing no trace of disease within hours of angelic contact. We're documenting organ regrowth, nerve restoration, and genetic repair that should take months or be completely impossible. The phenomenon wasn't limited to cancer. Paralyzed patients walked out of wheelchairs they'd used for decades. Blind individuals saw with perfect vision despite damaged optic nerves. Diabetics found their pancreases producing insulin normally after years of insulin dependence. Mental illness disappeared as brain chemistry balanced itself without medication. Children's hospitals reported the most dramatic transformations. Kids born with cerebral palsy developed normal motor functions overnight. Autistic children began communicating fluently after angelic encounters. Genetic disorders that had sentenced families to lifetimes of care simply vanished, leaving behind healthy children whose DNA showed no trace of previous abnormalities. The pharmaceutical industry faced extinction as medications became obsolete. Stock prices for drug companies plummeted as patients stopped needing treatments that had generated billions in revenue. Research into new medicines halted as investors realized miraculous healing had made chemical intervention primitive by comparison. Dr. Robert Chen, a neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, documented the most impossible case of all: a patient whose brain had been surgically removed due to aggressive tumor growth. After an angelic encounter, new brain tissue regenerated completely, with the patient retaining all memories, personality traits, and learned skills. MRI scans showed neural pathways identical to the original brain structure, as if consciousness had blueprinted its own reconstruction. Medical schools struggled to revise curricula that suddenly seemed antiquated. What was the point of studying disease treatment when divine intervention could heal anything instantly? Some institutions closed their doors, while others pivoted to studying the mechanisms behind miraculous healing, research that led them into quantum biology and consciousness studies rather than traditional medicine. The World Health Organization attempted to document and regulate the phenomena, but found their efforts futile. Healing didn't follow medical protocols, require clinical trials, or respect international borders. The angels healed whoever they encountered, regardless of insurance coverage, immigration status, or ability to pay, rendering humanity's healthcare systems simultaneously obsolete and liberated. Emergency rooms emptied as accidents and injuries healed spontaneously in the presence of transformed humans who carried traces of angelic energy. Hospitals became gathering places for consciousness education rather than medical treatment. Their former purpose as healing centers transformed into something beyond physical care entirely. Chapter 18: Environmental Restoration. Climate scientist Dr. Sarah Martinez watched in amazement as satellite imagery showed the Amazon rainforest regenerating at impossible speeds. Trees that had taken decades to mature were growing to full size in days. Species that had been extinct for years began reappearing in habitats that had been destroyed by human development. The reforestation is happening faster than our instruments can measure, she reported to the International Climate Council. Carbon dioxide levels are dropping rapidly as new plant growth accelerates photosynthesis beyond natural rates. Ocean pH is normalizing as acidification reverses itself. We're witnessing environmental healing that should take centuries compressed into weeks. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch began dissolving as plastic waste broke down into harmless organic compounds without human intervention. Coral reefs that had been bleached white by rising ocean temperatures bloomed with renewed color and life. Polluted rivers ran clean as contaminated water purified itself through processes that mystified environmental engineers. Endangered species populations exploded as reproductive rates increased dramatically. Pandas, tigers, elephants, and rhinoceros gave birth to healthy offspring in numbers that conservation biologists had thought impossible. Bee colonies that had been collapsing worldwide suddenly thrived, their populations stabilizing ecosystems that had been on the verge of total breakdown. The angels appeared at sites of environmental devastation worldwide: Chernobyl, Fukushima, the Aral Sea, deforested areas of Borneo. Where they walked, radiation levels dropped to safe ranges, toxic soil became fertile, and dead landscapes burst into abundant life. Nuclear waste storage facilities found their deadly contents transformed into inert materials that posed no threat to human health. Oil spills that had poisoned coastlines for decades disappeared as petroleum products converted into nutrients that fed marine ecosystems. The Exxon Valdez spill site in Alaska became a thriving wildlife sanctuary. The Gulf of Mexico recovered from the Deepwater Horizon disaster as if it had never occurred. Mining operations discovered their excavated areas spontaneously filling with topsoil rich enough to support agriculture. Strip-mined mountains regained their natural contours as earth and stone reorganized themselves into stable geological formations. Abandoned industrial sites bloomed with plant life that cleaned heavy metals from contaminated ground. Meteorologists reported unprecedented weather patterns as climate systems rebalanced themselves. Droughts ended with gentle rains that restored water tables without causing floods. Hurricanes and tornadoes diminished in frequency and intensity as atmospheric pressure stabilized. The ozone layer regenerated as harmful chemicals neutralized themselves in the upper atmosphere. Environmental activists found their life's work completed overnight by beings who healed the planet through methods that transcended human technology. Some celebrated the miraculous restoration, while others struggled with feelings of obsolescence as their passionate advocacy became unnecessary in the face of divine intervention. The transformation revealed that environmental destruction had never been inevitable. It was simply the price humanity paid for developing technology without wisdom, power without love, progress without responsibility for the consequences of their choices. Chapter 19. The Choice. Emma Rodriguez sat at her kitchen table, staring at the government notice that had arrived that morning. In 24 hours, the angels would open dimensional doorways in major cities worldwide. Anyone who chose to step through would begin the transformation into post-human consciousness, but there would be no returning to ordinary life afterward. Across from her, her husband Miguel held their 6-year-old daughter Sophia, both of them crying. The family that had been planning their summer vacation was now facing the possibility of eternal separation. Emma felt called to accept the angel's invitation, but Miguel feared losing his wife to a transformation he couldn't understand. "What if you become someone completely different?" Miguel whispered, his voice breaking. "What if the woman I love disappears into this new consciousness you're choosing? What if Sophia grows up without really knowing her mother?" Emma's heart shattered as she realized the impossible choice facing millions of families worldwide. The angels promised incredible abilities, cosmic consciousness, and participation in galactic civilization. But the price was leaving behind everyone unwilling or unable to make the same leap of faith. In homes across the planet, similar conversations played out. Parents debated whether to risk their children's future on promises from beings they'd known for only 40 days. Married couples faced the prospect that choosing different paths would end relationships that had lasted decades. Adult children struggled with abandoning elderly parents who felt too afraid or set in their ways to embrace such radical change. Religious communities split between those who saw the transformation as divine blessing and others who viewed it as spiritual suicide. Some churches held all-night prayer vigils, seeking guidance about humanity's destiny. Others organized to resist what they believed was humanity's greatest temptation since Eden's apple. The angels offered no easy answers to those wrestling with the choice. Love cannot be forced, they explained to those demanding guarantees about maintaining relationships. Each consciousness must choose its own path of growth. Some will graduate together, others at different times, but love transcends dimensional boundaries. Separation is temporary, reunion eternal. Young people generally embrace the opportunity with enthusiasm, while older generations struggle to abandon familiar patterns of thought and relationship. College campuses emptied as students flocked to transformation sites, leaving behind degrees that would be meaningless in post-physical reality. Retirement homes filled with elderly people grieving for grandchildren who chose cosmic consciousness over family dinners. The most heartbreaking scenes occurred in hospitals, where terminally ill patients faced choosing between miraculous healing through transformation or remaining in dying bodies to spend final days with loved ones afraid to join them. Some families chose transformation together, viewing death as motivation to risk unknown spiritual territory. Others said goodbye as transformed relatives prepared to explore dimensions beyond physical comprehension. As the final hours approached, humanity realized they were facing not just personal choice, but species-level evolution. Those who stepped through the doorways would become something beyond current human limitations. Those who remained would continue earthly existence, but forever changed by knowing what their species could become. Chapter 20. The Departure Warning. The three angels stood together in Times Square as crowds gathered for what everyone knew would be their final message. Dimensional doorways shimmered behind them, translucent portals that revealed glimpses of reality beyond human imagination. Some people moved toward the gateways with eager anticipation, while others held back in fear or grief. Children of Earth, the lead angel's voice resonated across every communication device on the planet. Our time among you draws to a close, but this is only the beginning of humanity's true education. Those who choose transformation today join a cosmic community that spans galaxies and dimensions. Those who remain will face trials that will prepare your species for future graduation opportunities. The second angel stepped forward, his expression grave. We are not the only beings interested in humanity's development. Others watch your progress with different intentions. The same qualities that make your species capable of divine transformation also make you valuable to entities who would exploit rather than elevate consciousness. Your choice today determines whether you face what comes next as cosmic citizens or planetary prisoners. A chill ran through the assembled crowds as the implications became clear. The angels' departure would leave humanity vulnerable to influences they had been protected from during the visitation. The beings who had brought healing, wisdom, and transformation were also Earth's guardians against threats too terrible to fully comprehend. The third angel delivered the most disturbing revelation. The fallen ones your scriptures describe were not cast out of heaven. They were exiled to dimensions where their rebellion could not contaminate divine realms. But exile sentences eventually end, and their release approaches. They seek to claim this planet and its inhabitants before you can complete your evolution beyond their reach. The departure countdown began as millions worldwide made their final choices. Families embraced for what might be the last time. Lovers kissed goodbye before stepping into unknown dimensions. Children waved to parents too afraid to join them in transformation that promised immortality, but guaranteed nothing familiar would remain unchanged. As the first humans stepped through dimensional doorways, they began glowing with the same light that surrounded the angels. Their physical forms became translucent, then completely transparent, then vanished entirely into realms beyond material existence. Their last words to those remaining behind carried both promise and warning. We'll return when you're ready. Prepare yourselves. Darker teachers are coming to offer easier paths with terrible destinations. The angels looked back one final time before entering their own portal. Remember, they called to humanity. Graduation was offered to all, but learning continues for those who need more time. The choice will come again, but circumstances will be more challenging. What seems like abandonment is actually love giving you space to grow into wisdom that cannot be taught, only earned through experience that tests every aspect of your character.